Welcome back across the Atlantic to the streets of London, and the cold old streets of London. Anyone who calls this bracing would have to be half crazy. But we're here to see Big Ben. Not that particular Big Ben, the other Big Ben. Ben Elton. In the world of British comedy, he is the biggest star of the lot, which makes him a pretty big star anywhere. He's written 4 novels, they've all gone to #1, and they've sold millions of copies. He's had award-winning television series, and he's had videotapes and recordings. He's had 3 plays here in the West End. You name it, it seems that he's done it, or else he's doing it. I hate to use the phrase, but for Ben Elton, the world really is a stage.
Sport should be about everyone getting involved. Sport is for all. I mean, if you were having a game of cricket in the park, and there was someone in the back who was a bit crap, you'd give him a chance, wouldn't you? You'd bowl underarm, wouldn't you? Give him a little chance. Well, I reckon that's what the Australians and the West Indians ought to do for us, don't you? Yeah, so let's not talk about our cricketing renaissance. Oh, yeah, we beat the Kiwis. Yeah, whoopee-doo.
The truth is, the English can laugh at themselves better than most. Tonight, for Ben Elton, it's another 2,000 fans at the Old Mayflower Theatre in Southampton, part of a barnstorming national tour that serves as a warm-up for his Aussie assault next month. This best of British comic paced the Poms performance in everything from soccer to sex.
Any community is good at laughing at itself. What they don't like is when other people laugh at them. So I suppose, you know, if I'd been an Aussie on stage doing the stuff I was doing about our pathetic performance at the Olympics, you know, and our, you know, this whole idea of we're going to put the great back in Britain, and, well, what do you mean? I mean, what, suddenly we're going to be able to chuck a discus? Is this what you're going to make it happen, you know, overnight, some politician, and we can throw javelins again? But I guess if it had been an Aussie comedian down there in Southampton laying that down, perhaps the audience wouldn't have laughed so much. Because it's us laughing at ourselves, it's great fun. And it is a bit pathetic. I mean, there are 60 million of us. We are a G7 nation, and we got 1 gold, and that was in rowing. And it's not exactly, you can't have a street party on the strength of that, Ray, you know what I'm saying? It was so funny, though, because they tried to make it, because, you know, because you don't want to, you know, put down the athletes, everyone worked hard, and we just had a bad year, you know, and they'd all done their best. But, of course, when they came back to Heathrow, you know, our gold winner flooded in, you know. There's this poor rowing bloke surrounded by cameras, you know, and he's on his own. I mean, the Irish got about 6 gold. How was the Aussie Olympics this time?
20.
20 gold. Well, we wrote 40 towels. We've got John Cleese. You can chuck your javelin.
But you made the point that perhaps the Poms should boycott Sydney. And just
I don't think we should go, Ray. I think it's asking for it. We'll get off the plane, we'll say, well, do you want to take the piss now or wait 5 seconds? We've got a few years, maybe we'll put some together, but...
The other one you take, I guess, is that your role now is basically stand up for the punters, to stand up for what you call the uncool people.
Well, I think we are terribly victims of style fascism. I think words fashion and fascism share syllables, and I don't think that's any coincidence. Well, obviously it is, but I mean, for the purposes of semantics, I think it makes a good point, because more and more images of perfection are becoming the norm, and because it's now possible to actually imitate those images via cosmetic surgery, etc. You know, we're watching 90210 or Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Kids, I don't know if you've got that over there or whatever. Well, this American soap kiddie stuff, you know, and like the perfection of these teenagers. I remember, like, kids' programs in the old days, the double-deckers or the famous 5, the kids were parties. They had broken glasses and they were crap and runny noses, and that's what kids are like. Now you watch a kids' show, and it's like something off MTV. And from that point on through our lives, we're watching MTV and thinking we should look like that. And I think it's outrageous. I believe that we should stand up for the fact that we're not all perfect and enjoy that, because I don't want to live in a world full of 90210s. I want a bit of light and shade, thank you very much.
Yeah, and yet you make that point that despite your contempt of that the English kids, like Australian kids, will go out and buy a Michael Jordan T-shirt and put their baseball helmet back to front.
Absolutely, and I mean, I wouldn't, you know, I'm not telling anybody else what to wear, and I mean, kids like to follow fashion, and I mean, I remember my stacked boots, so I didn't have them very high, but about that high, and my extremely tight brown cords. I don't think my testicles are recovered, quite frankly, so we've all been victims of fashion at some time.
Did you look good then?
I looked like a sex machine, actually, 13 years old and ready to pull. It took me about 5 more years, but I got there in the end. I suppose I'm just saying that we should at least celebrate the fact that we're not all the same, we are different. And my comedy is sourced in that, and not in the kind of the... I don't know, not to diss, to use an American term, not to diss American comedy, because some of it is absolutely fantastic, but It tends to celebrate beauty and power. You look at Friends, you look at Eddie Murphy, who I admire very much, but what he's doing is cool, also cool. Even the nerd in Friends is 20 times cooler than I'm ever going to be. That's what's a joke. The nerd in American comedy would make me look like total dag.
But sun-dried tomatoes pretty much symbolise a lot, don't they?
Well, sun-dried tomatoes. I suppose...
Or wine tasting.
Wine tasting is a classic thing. None of us own up. None of us say, no, I don't want to taste it because I know bugger all about it. You know, I wouldn't know. I know I can't send it back if I don't like it. That's not good enough. It's got to be wrong. So not liking it, that's not the point. You know, I make the point that, you know, they never ask me if I want to taste the chips. But the truth of the matter is I know a lot more about chips than I do about wine.
He goes on, he brings the bottle over and hovers there. You've got to read the label. You've got to stop what you're saying, turn and read the bleeding label. Yes, that's it. That's the one I ordered. Well done. Congratulations, that corresponds exactly to the one we discussed 90 seconds ago. It's not a bottle of brown ale. Well done, thank you. Well, would you like to taste it? Yes, I'd love to taste the wine. Why don't I be honest, just once in my life, face up to the truth of who I am. No, I don't want to taste it because you know, as well as I do, I know bugger all about it. Just pour it, get it in a glass, get me pissed, get another bottle.
There are parts of your show from last night that we couldn't put on prime televisions in Australia.
I'm glad, because it means somebody's going to have to buy a ticket to see it.
But because of the language of the sex. And yet we could put Schwarzenegger slaughtering 100 people.
Censorship should be about common sense, and there's very few things that I would advocate, per se, censoring adults from, because they have to be able to make their own decision. But clearly, kids are not sexually mature, and I think there's obviously a good argument for making as much of an effort as possible to avoid that much sort of sexually mature material getting to them. But I agree with you, the violent, that we're talking about sex, which we always do, Ray, when I'm talking to you, you are. TV's Mr. Sex. We get round there in the end, and then we get on the violence, and before you know it, we're having a party. Thank you, Jane. See ya.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Well, that's pretty good, isn't it? I mean, with first opening show, we got the extreme of Tom Cruise to Ben Elton.
Well, it's pretty good. I enjoy the comparison, Ray.
Both sex symbols. Of course. Both like a beer.
Yeah.
Married to Australian women.
Tall.
Tall, very tall.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, Ray, look, I'd rather have a beer with you than a roast lamb with Tom Cruise. I believe there's 10,421 boozers in London. We've only done the one. Do you fancy a call?
Absolutely, let's do it.
Let's go. Right, Ray, well, I thought we'd start at the Ferret and Underpants, and...
in Australia, it would be the railway, wouldn't it?
It would be the railway. Yeah, the Ferret, Frog, Truncheon and Police Officer. We have good names for boozers over here. And actually, the English pub remains a worthwhile...